on a 3-point scale, not the kids, which is coming a little bit later. Family groupings. Families were a pretty good predictor of test scores. Most siblings were at the same language level, but do
they come with a lot of siblings, or most of these multi-kid families?
These are anywhere from 1 student per family to 5 students per family. Ooh, so wow. I would say the average is 2 or 3.
Or do you find that the multi-sibling kids do better or worse, because they probably get more native language at home, right?
I would say so, and it also ties into geographic findings, which we're going to look at a little bit sooner. So in terms of geographic findings, we do have more students in the north side than we do in the south side. But this kind of, I suspected that this was going to be the case, that the students in the south side scored much higher than students in the north side. And some significant outliers were 5 students in the north side scored at 0, and then 1 student.
Siblings?
Some of them were.
Yeah, okay, maybe that's not relevant.
It's not as, those were kind of scattered among families, I believe.
I think you expect that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and then 1 student in the south side scored at 2.2, which isn't surprising given that the student is about 9 or 10 years old and he arrived in the United States when he was 3. And he was referred to us through a friend during a time when our enrollment was kind of open. So we didn't really say no or look too closely at his English language level.
Well, I would tend to think that some of these kids are coming primarily for the socialization.
It is, definitely, I would say that's the case.
It's a cool place to be, right?
It is, right. And we
get to ride the van over here.
Yeah, so one thing one tough subject that's going to be coming up in board meetings soon is where do we draw the line in terms of what our target group is for students, what is too good, what is too poor for us to work with in our student body.
You realize that when you have a tool like this, you could be working with people at a distance and they wouldn't have to take up your energy.
Right, exactly, and that's something else in terms of my recommendations that are coming up. So the learning teams, as we have them structured right now, the Tigers are young students ages 6 to 8. The red team are beginner students, and my estimate to where they would fall is anywhere from 0 to 0.2. My blue team are intermediate students. They're the smallest team, and I estimate that they will place at 0.5. And then the green team, I estimate they would be 0.7 to 1. So my predictions in terms of, I did have a suspicion that quite a few of these teams had students in them that were not appropriate placed because when we placed the students, it was just based on our observations. We don't have access to their ELL scores or their grades from the school system because of privacy laws. But I did suspect that 1 or 2 students in the red team are better speakers and they would score at the intermediate level. I suspected as well that there were 1 or 2 students in the blue team who were better speakers and they would score at the advanced level. And then 1 student in the green team is a worse speaker and would score at the intermediate level. I kind of thought that this 1 student was not as good as we thought. And then the bottom one is the most interesting. The Tigers are the youngest students, and because they're younger and they absorb language faster, I figured that if we did the general placement test on them, that they would have similar results as the intermediate and the advanced teams, the blue and the green teams, anywhere from 0.5 to 1.
You've got one thing to remember though, like when you're doing programs like this, there's a certain amount of literacy involved, and certain kids that speak well might not have literacy skills, and vice versa.
And that's something that really does.
Because like when you're just working with kids in a tutoring situation, the only dimension of them that you're seeing is that oral dimension.
Yeah, and that really does show up in the findings. Hey, just 1 second. So the results, in general, the learning teams did score in the beginning, intermediate, advanced kind of order. The red team was a 0.3 average, so they placed in the 0.2 to 0.5 range of where DynEd has these groupings. The blue team was not that higher than the red team on average.
But that was your smallest group?
That was our smallest group.
Your stats are going to be skewed the most.
And then the green team placed pretty much exactly where we thought they were going to place in that range. So the surprising findings, one student in the red team scored at a 1, which is higher than most students in the green team.
That's the one we were just talking about?
That's the one we were just talking about. Okay. And she's also from a large family unit where some of her siblings scored as low as 0.2. So that was really a surprise for me. 4 other students in the red team scored 0.5, which is where most blue team students placed. So what we're really seeing is that the red team has a lot more better speakers than we thought. And then this one was also a big surprise. One student in the green team scored at 0.2, which is where most red team students placed.
Green is high, right?
Green is advanced. Yeah. So he scored all the way down at the beginner.
Check that student's reading level.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what I'd say.
And he's a very, again, like you said, very good speaker. That was the only dimension we were seeing.
Believe me, there's a lot of American kids that fall into that category. Excellent speakers.
Yes. Well, and that's a huge problem in Milwaukee right now as well. 4th grade reading level. Most people are not there. So the Tigers, we did 2 placement tests for them. They took the kids placement test in the beginning, and about 2 weeks later I have them take the general placement test because I wanted to see where they stacked up in comparison to the other teams. And like I mentioned, I thought that they would do very well because their spoken English is so good and they are so young. But they actually scored very low, 0.0 and 0.2. All of them were on par with the red team, which is the beginner group.
I was watching some of these students when they took the test. They were giving answers that I couldn't believe.
Yeah.
I mean, it was almost like they didn't understand what they were looking at.
Right.
You know, it was just like if somebody gave me a test in Burmese, I started clicking stuff, you'd say, well, I don't know.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So the kids placement test, which is on a 6-point scale. So for the young learners, the highest score was 2.5 and the lowest was 1.5. That actually surprised me as well because even for the kids placement test, they are classified beginners. They were not intermediate.
Because the kids is like a whole different world.
Yeah.
I mean, it's sort of like the lower world, and you can be high in that lower world or low. Yeah. But you're still in the lower world.
I thought they would be at least in the intermediate world, and the kids.
Well, what you'd have to do is try to give them the general placement test and see how they score.
And they scored very poorly.
Yeah, as I would suspect.
Yeah, and so this finding, some students who scored very poorly on the general placement tests did better than others on the kids placement test. And down here I did say the text component of the general placement test is likely the cause of that. So my recommendations in terms of reshuffling our teams. We have to make sure that everything adds up to 13 because of the number of iPads that we currently have. So
you gotta get one more.
I think one or 2 more would really be ideal.
I've actually got an old regular iPad I could bring. I should have brought it. I could just let the kids use it.
It's fine.
I'll get you out of that unlucky streak, okay?
So my recommendations are the 13 students who scored 0.0 to 0.2 are sent to the red team. And that would include those 3 Tigers who scored at 0.0. The 7 students who scored 0.5 are sent to the blue team. And the 3 students who scored 0.7 to 1 are sent to the green team. The 3 Tigers who scored at 0.2 remain in the Tigers.
This sounds like spring training. Sending them up, sending them down.
And this kind of gets into the details of how our classroom is set up. We don't have enough iPads for all of the students. 3 students placed 1 to 2.2, which is above the green team. If you remember, the green team placed 0.7 almost exclusively. We also have another team called the Homework Club, who they just do homework from beginning to end. They don't do DynEd at all.
I bet that's a club everybody wants to join.
Well, it's very popular, that's for sure. But it's for students who are mostly in middle school and high school.
Oh, they got a lot of work to do. Somebody can help them.
Yeah, but these 3 students don't bring enough homework to be in that club. So for these students, I recommend independent study using books and study guides for those books to work on reading and study skills.
It's so nice just to get a few more iPads.
Yeah, and then so here are the alternatives to that. that we obtain 2 more iPads, allowing all of these 3 students to study in the language lab. The second alternative is that we obtain 1 more iPad. The 2 students who are at 1.0 can study in the language lab, and the kid who's at 2.2 will do independent study. Another alternative is that we obtain 1 more iPad. The 2 students who placed at 1.0 study in the language lab, and the student who scored 2.2 is discharged.
Oh, don't do that. Don't.
Right.
Yeah,
that's the least.
That should be your reward for doing well.
The least desirable.
Your reward for doing well is you get a big contract.
Yeah.
I mean, come on, this is
so,
major leagues.
So our goals in terms of structure is that, like I mentioned, all the kids who are in homework club right now are not doing DynEd in our language lab because homework takes up all their time. My goals is that all of the students in the homework club have access to DynEd outside of tutoring in their homes or smartphones, tablets, etc. And they're in the group home study, which I actually already have set up in the system. Most of them did the placement test. They're just not actively studying at this time. The second goal in terms of structure is that most, if not all of the students in the Tigers, Red, Blue, Green team also have access to DynEd outside of tutoring, in addition to study in the language lab. Our goals in terms of progress, we know that beginning students will improve at a faster rate than advanced students. This is still kind of like I'm making it up. I'm not sure, especially at the advanced levels, if this is going to be feasible. But I would really like the lower level students who are at 0 to 0.2 to make a jump at least up to 0.5.
Because making a jump of that 0.2, that's sort of moving up a level. Okay?
Right.
And it's called leveling up, and it's like, yeah, that's reasonable, you know, but never having done this, it's hard to know.
It is. And so the blue team and the green team goals, where they're up there when they're at 0.5 and 0.7, I'm not sure if going up 3 points is, you know, whereas here our goal is 3 to 5 points. I'm not sure if even 0.3.
Well, if they do it with fidelity, that'll happen. But the fact that they're only doing it twice a week, and if they miss, they're not getting a lot of time.
Yeah, and we're getting...
I think your goals are ambitious, but doable.
And then, see, I don't have any sort of deadline here. At DynEd in the training, they talk about like the 100 hours of study benchmark. We're not going to achieve that even in a year at our current frequency of twice.
Don't say that, because if students start doing it at home, you'll be surprised.
Right. So, yeah, that's my little update.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And it's been nice talking to you.
Yeah, you too.